Welcome to the Passive House podcast, brought to you by Passive House Accelerator, a catalyst for zero carbon building. For news, stories and connections from all flavours of Passive House, check out the articles, videos and more at passivehouseaccelerator.com. Sign up to receive regular updates about events, get your technical questions answered and contribute to the community forum, and of course, attend the weekly online Global Passive House Happy Hour. Now, here's this week's Passive House podcast. Well, welcome back to another episode of the Passive House podcast. I'm Matthew Cutler-Welsh, and I'm coming to you from a relatively chilly Auckland.
And I'm Zach Semke, and I'm coming to you from Seattle, which is beautiful right now as we record this. But I think when listeners hear this for the first time, we'll be in the middle of a pretty intense heat wave, some record-breaking temperatures. So feels like climate change is being experienced.
It's smacking us in the face with some severe reality. I was actually thinking this morning that it was quite chilly. So I measured 6 degrees Celsius, which I'm just having a look, is around about 41, I think, Fahrenheit. I've got some photos from my house last year when it was 5 degrees Celsius, and I used those photos to explain nighttime radiation because there was ice forming on top of the car. When it was 5 degrees, but night sky radiation, blah blah blah, building science. It gets really really cold, and we get excited about that sort of stuff. But yeah, so I was just thinking that wow, it's quite cold here, middle of June, so we're winter time down here, southern hemisphere. But you're bracing yourselves for a severe heat wave by the sound of it.
That's right. Yeah. I mean, right now it's actually 64 degrees in this middle of the day. It's going to be a high of 75 today, but by Sunday and Monday, they're expecting temperatures to notch very close to 100 degrees Celsius or Fahrenheit.
Yeah.
Thankfully, it's Fahrenheit, which is what we were saying. It's like 37 or 38 Celsius. Right.
Yeah, it's getting right up there, and early on in the season too.
Yeah, it's pretty weird. I think we've hit 100 degrees 3 times in the history of weather in Seattle, at least since it's been measured. So this is a big anomaly for sure.
Yeah, I guess we kind of joking aside, we talk a lot about Passive House in warmer climates, and I think the reality is that more places are becoming warmer climates.
Yeah, definitely. And you see more practitioners thinking about future climate files. You know, what will the climate look like in 20 years, in 50 years, so that they can anticipate those conditions and make sure that the buildings that they're designing are going to stay safe and comfortable in those conditions. I think that makes a lot of sense for sure as we see these changes.
Yes, lucky we have the technology for doing that. All right, let's get on to today's show. But before we do, we've got some people to thank for helping bring us the Passive House podcast.
We sure do. So everything we do at the Accelerator comes thanks to support from our sponsors. Our founding sponsors are 475 High Performance Building Supply, Bax Ingui Architects, Mitsubishi Electric Train HVAC US, Partel, Glavel Foam Glass Gravel, Minutair All-in-One HVAC and Dehumidification Units, RDH Building Science, Rockwool North America, Stocorp, and Zola Windows. Our champion sponsor is SIGA, and our stakeholder partner is NYSERDA, the New York State Energy Research and Development Authority. So a big shout out and big thank you for their generous support to Passive House Accelerator.
That's Glavel episodes, our first component spotlight special edition podcast. That was pretty popular. We get quite a few downloads for that one.
Yeah, definitely. It was Rob is doing great work, and that was really fun to do. So it's great to see that there's some real interest in folks hearing what he had to say and learning about his story.
Absolutely, yeah, it's great backstory. So go back into the archives. Easy to find on the new Passive House Accelerator website, and you can check out that interview with Rob Conboy from Global, and also our whole backlog of 44. We're up to number 45 now. Podcasts coming up to a year on. Well, let's get into this week's show, shall we? I was very excited to get the opportunity to talk with Shaun because pretty much everyone, I imagine, listening to this will know of Shaun or have heard him before. He's one of the regulars on the weekly happy hour, and you've probably seen him around if you've watched any videos from 475 as well. So he's a great personality and great person to have. But you know Shaun from a little way back, don't you, Zach?
I do, yeah. In the conversation that he has with you, which is fantastic, he mentions that he was at the Seattle Passive House conference, and that was, I think, in 2017, probably. And so that's where I met him. Was he right before the conference? He brought those Icebacks challenge structures down to Seattle, and in collaboration with NK Architects, which is where I was at the time, built them. And I met him then, and was just blown away by his energy, the generosity in spirit that he has about spreading the word around Passive House, and just getting things crazy done, like working at 4 a.m. setting up these ice boxes in time for the Seattle Design Festival. And I mean, just a very warm and smart guy. So then with the Passive House Accelerator, he and Monty were really instrumental in launching the whole Global Passive House Happy Hour, which has become a really important feature and fixture at the Accelerator. So I feel a debt of gratitude toward him and toward Monty for that. And he's also an educator and product consultant extraordinaire with 475, just a really powerful force of accelerating change and moving toward more Passive House in the world. So he's awesome.
He is. Let's hear him. This is my chat. Going into a bit of the background of some of the faces of the Passive House Accelerator. Here he is, Shaun St-Amour, and my conversation. Great to have the chance to sit down and have a chat with you, Shaun. Thank you for your time. As always, how much time would you think you spend on Passive House Accelerator stuff at the moment each week?
So it's kind of like a hobby, because I still have a day job with 475. And so it's a balance between it all. And luckily, with the role I have, I can kind of mix and match because of just timing. And being kind of an entrepreneur and maybe a bit of a workaholic, I kind of never stop doing stuff. And especially with, the whole kind of happiness factor, when you love what you do, you just keep doing it. So I've kind of been lucky that I've found a bit of a passion in the sustainable prefab passive house world. And with COVID, the doors kind of open globally to connect with so many cool people. And I just I feel like I've found a family, and so connecting with all these people, I can't get enough. So it's been great.
Let's go back because I want to dive into your story and how you came into the world of Passive House. But let's start with prefab and how you got into building in general. Where did it all start out? What did you train as?
Yeah. So kind of go back to my youth. I, typical Canadian kid playing hockey. And so being a bit of a goalie, bit of a strange character, goalies always have crazy superstitions and all that kind of stuff. And I didn't make a career at hockey, but that did allow an opportunity where I got to go to the University of British Columbia in the wood products processing program. And in my university degree, I kind of had a path of, do you go work in a sawmill or do you go work into the most value-added company? And so at the time I was like, well, I want to deal with prefab because prefab is using all the wood components. And during that time, my father, who was dealing with some financing some capital projects, he was looking at the modular market. And so we would have these amazing stories of how we could change the modular industry and how we could bring modular homes to the masses and get away from stick building. And when I graduated, I actually got a job at a company that at the time was the most automated factory in North America. You know, they were manufacturing 7 to 12 houses per day, putting them into containers and sending them to Japan. And at the time it was amazing. But the part that kind of bothered me was they said that they were sustainable. And I was like, you're not sustainable, you're just efficient. And so then I kind of just kept going down this path of like, okay, well, what's the next best thing? And then I'm really lucky because I got an opportunity to go to Germany and actually present at one of the biggest, housing conferences in Europe, and got to see a company called Balfritz. And to me, this is the company that is still the most sustainable prefab company in the world. And I was like, I want to be like them. And so then I was like, okay, now I have a benchmark and a bit of a mentor to kind of, follow. And then just kind of kept going through the motions. And eventually my dad and I had our own construction company, and we were like, Balfritz is what we're working towards. And
the prefab that you mentioned, the modular stuff, was that volumetric?
So we were just doing elements.
Right. And shipping those, you were exporting those, right?
Yeah.
Was that a market at the time, or was that a market that you created to ship those overseas?
Again, it was, things kind of happened for funny reasons, but in the Kobe earthquake of 1997. Wow, this is going back a few years now. When the earthquake happened, there was a couple of these houses that were standing. And so everyone's like, oh, well, if we're going to rebuild these homes, we need to build to that particular standard. And so this company just went from a couple of homes per year to hundreds, just because people realized that the North American platform frame construction was a more structurally stable method of building compared to the method that they were currently doing.
Yeah, right. And has that continued, or did it just go away?
Unfortunately, at the time, the company that I worked for was 50 plus years old, and unfortunately, the change in hierarchy, they changed, and unfortunately, the company is no longer in existence. But it's kind of funny because like my grandfather used to be a distributor and builder of these homes. So it's kind of gone from like, at the time it was like my grandfather worked there, my dad did a couple, and then, I was in the company later on. So it's funny how it's a small world and things are, very circular in motion of how we tiptoe around things.
But so. Prefab, I just want to pause on that for a moment. Prefab as an industry in North America is a big thing, right? It's grown, continues to grow.
Yeah, it's a big thing in my world because I surround myself with it. But overall, though, I think the latest stats are 4% of all homes are built in a factory, mainly modular or volumetric. The panelized portion is probably in the like 0.1 percentile of it all, and it's growing because the high performance market is being able to push it, where you're not just shipping wood, 2x4s, 2x6s, and plywood, but now actually putting in the insulation, putting on the tapes and membranes, and shipping this more robust panel that makes the high performance system a lot more. It makes that process a lot faster.
Why is everyone not doing it?
Oh, what I have found, and when I was trying to get a prefab company started, was general contractors who are mainly builders had framers on staff. And the fact that you'd be taking away time and, in a sense, jobs from the framers, they wouldn't want to go down that route. And then you go to the developer and say, hey, I can make your jobs go faster, which means more money back in your product because you're financing the money to be able to do these things. and that individual would just say, well, I'm trusting the builder to give me a product in the time, the most efficient manner. So I'm relying on them to build it the way that they know how to. And so, but again, in BC, we've got 3 really good companies, and there's a couple more brewing, and I definitely see at least one new element prefab manufacturer starting per year as we deal with the lack of skilled trades. And so, I mean, from kind of like a bigger issue, society, we have our own social issues. Construction, we have the skill issues, and then we're trying to push the high performance kind of below that. And so if we're aware of like a little bit of the hierarchy of how we are in the priorities of people, but high performance is something that I've ended up focusing on my kind of like 3rd trip to Europe, where we went back and looked at high performance, and luckily the local university every year organizes these trips. So I got to jump on it, and that's when Passive House kind of came. This was about 2011, and we kept hearing about Passive House, and that's kind of when I first got the bug. And so I already had like the prefab knowledge and kind of the path of being like, okay, we need to figure out how to incorporate this high level of prefab into our Vancouver projects. And we realized that we need to be the builder, we need to be the prefabber, and we need to developer, because at the end of the day, the client, they just want the stainless steel appliances and quartz countertops. The whole thing about high performance in that, well, we might as well reap the benefits because we see the benefits and we know that it's going to work. And the Europeans have proved it time and time again.
Uh-huh. So what were you doing at this point in time? You had finished doing the prefab, and then you
so I went from working for the prefab company, then working with one of the biggest condominium developers in Vancouver, and it was kind of nice because I always tell people, like, I'm a jack of all trades, master of none, because I was a quality inspector for this company, and then in the downturn in 2008, they moved me over into being kind of a project manager for all their presentation and sales centers. So it was like every 3 months I was like building a small house, a 2-bedroom house that was showing off the condos. And then in early 2011, my dad and I decided to start our own construction company and really kind of work towards our passion. And that's kind of where, in about 2014, I took the Passive House designer course. And 2017, I took the tradesperson course. And while I was at BCIT, which is our local technical school, kind of like the last day, I kind of like planted a little seed, being like, hey, if you guys are ever looking for, instructors, I know I'll be a part of this team. It sounds pretty awesome. And, I like to be passionate and share my knowledge with people, and let me know. And, within about 4 or 5 months, I got to be an assistant instructor. And within a year, I was part of like the team. So, really.
And I can imagine you'd be pretty valuable in that, having your practical experience, or your industry experience, and also the technical knowledge as well. That's incredibly valuable, because I know that I'm a bit out of my depth when it comes to the hands-on stuff, because I don't have that experience as a builder. So to have someone who can that builders can respect, and also just have that wealth of knowledge, I think it's hugely valuable.
Yeah, I mean, the thing that I take it into is just like the quality aspect of, when you try to build a quality product, like Passive House is just part of that quality assurance. You don't have to talk about the benefits to the homeowner of the comfort or indoor air quality. I mean, when you're doing things, there's just that level of detail and knowledge. And what I typically find with builders is just they never learned the why in how they do things. When you put on poly, somebody's like, oh yeah, the inspector told us to put it on, that's why we do it. And then the inspector leaves and then they cut it. And, and so nobody understood why it was needed. And so now we have these discussions of like, the wood is doing this, and guess what? We can go from a 2x4, we went to a 2x6, we can go back to a 2x4 now, because we can do exterior insulation. And a lot of people are, and I would say is like, we're really good at building cabins with really nice kitchens and baths, we're moving towards putting on that sweater, and that type of details. And so
the thing that's staggering about that is how universal it is on a couple of fronts. I mean, we talk about building wooden tents instead of cabins because we have the same sort of feeling that we're just constructing these things out of wood. They get condensation just like when you go camping and you touch the side of the tent, all the condensation comes through, and they're about as warm as that, just bigger and draftier. And the other point there about us doing things just because that's the way they've been done, I can think of in Australia, they put foil in buildings at the moment. Most houses will have a layer of foil in there somewhere. And that doesn't make any sense when you look at the science of that, but it's the way things are done. And so to get someone to stop doing that is you have to sit down and really go through the building science of why it's a bad idea. Same thing here with our roofs. We put material directly under the roofing iron, and it's builders are told, or roofers are told, that it's there because it needs to mop up the inevitable condensation on the underside of the roof. And he's like, well, how about we stop condensation appearing there in the first place? And like, oh no, we couldn't do that. And it's because this is what we have to do. So I think that's a really good point, that no one's got it fully figured out in any particular part of the world. And one of my frustrations is that a lot of people have got various aspects figured out, but we just seem to not be willing to learn from other parts of the world, or it takes a long time to learn from other parts of the world. We kind of have to reinvent the wheel, it seems.
Yeah, and get people passionate about things, and it's funny you talk about the why, and again, it's maybe a bit of a realization too of like what shelter is to most people. Like I remember in kind of 2015, 2016, trying to figure out my either legacy or career path, and I was like, okay, well, because of Maslow's law of hierarchy of needs, I'm like, you know what, I like shelter, and I think I could be involved in that aspect of things because people need shelter. Like that's a thing people need to buy in life. Like it's kind of guaranteed thing that people need to own. But what can we do to enhance the shelter that we can offer people? And then, then again, and I learned about Passive House. I was like, well, we can move shelter into this really nice thing with not a lot of effort. We just need to get over this education of getting people to understand that they don't need to wake up and be like, oh, I better deal with the thermostat today, or I better open up windows because the house is going to get too hot. You just be like, the house as a system can work really nicely if you just do these things and teach people the data and the science behind it. And then they kind of like, oh, this makes sense. This works. Let's do it.
So you were finishing off training and learning about Passive House. You had created a vision and sat down with your dad to create a company, which was by all means successful, right? You were had a pretty reasonable staff and were going places. What made you decide to move away from that?
Yeah. So kind of 2017 was really like the year I just jumped into Passive House. I, again, took the tradesperson course in January, and then I just signed up for every conference. I went to the PHI conference in Vienna, went to Oakland, the APHN, went to FIAS in Seattle. And what was really interesting was the trip to Vienna, where we got to see the Icebox Challenge. And that kind of spurred a whole kind of another year of, I'd say, awesomeness in Passive House, because the city of Vancouver and the Passive House Canada were looking at doing, a test case in Vancouver to help promote Passive House. And so at the time, I actually met a gentleman, and him and I bought a property together. He's the architect, I'd be the builder. And so he managed the design aspect of that competition, and then I got to manage the build. And of course, we had to make it, we had to turn it into prefab because we didn't have access to the site. So I just applied all the things that I love doing into this pet project. And so it was a really cool design. The design matched the local mountains, which was great for Vancouver. Moving these boxes across North America was quite a challenge, but it definitely, made it work. And so we did the Icebox Challenge in the summer of 2017. And then, people liked it. It was a success to a little bit of the point where the code house was built probably better than the average builder. And I'm not trying to be egotistical, but people didn't see the big numbers, that 90% energy efficiency that we kind of talk about. And so
you just couldn't bring yourself to build the code one as badly as it needed to be.
Yeah, when we built our homes or we got our, in renovations, we just didn't leave a hole in the wall. We just did things that way. So, but anyhow, it was still a success, and to the point where our good friend Zach Semsky was in Seattle, and he got involved, and he bought it off Passive House Canada in the city of Vancouver for $1, and so off it went to Seattle. And then from there, it went to it stayed in Portland over the winter, and next it was in New York and Philadelphia and Washington and then in Pittsburgh. And after my trip to Philadelphia, I was able to train somebody locally who could kind of take it on to Washington and Pittsburgh. But during that whole journey, I got to meet a lot of great people in the Passive House world, and I just really enjoyed it. And so in Vancouver, we used to have these Passive House socials, when we can actually gather. Like it's kind of weird to think pre-COVID of how we used to meet once a month at a pub and talk Passive House. And I was able to organize those events. And what we realized is that, we could make it more enjoyable if we could have like a 20-30 minute presentation of some type of project and then sit around the pub and, talk shop for the rest of the evening. And then when COVID hit back in March, I think you all know Monty Paulson, and he called me up on a Friday, and it's like 4:45 on March 12th. He calls and was like, "Hey, we need to keep the Passive House community together. Can you organize your Passive House socials online?" And I was like, "Sure, Monty. I have no clue how to do this, but this sounds great. Let's do it." And so, with all the different connections we had, we ended up connecting with Zach and Mike with the accelerator, and they had the capacity and kind of like the bandwidth to take it to the next level. And all of a sudden, 63 episodes later, the Global Passive House Happy Hour has been a weekly Wednesday event or Thursday event for you guys. And it's been great to just connect and see all these amazing projects and you talk about passion and desire and figuring things out. Like these projects have just been amazing to witness, and the fact that we're getting past some of those first project in Boston or New York or Vancouver, and now we're seeing the other cities take it upon, and even now, like say in Vancouver, you're now getting like a Passive House on certain districts or certain streets, and so it's like, okay, when's the next street going to get their Passive House? And even that too, like we do with the International Summer Passive House Days, we do a bike tour, and we might, again, because of COVID, we won't be able to do it this year, but we kind of have this unofficial Street of Dreams in Vancouver where you could ride down on your bike and see like 14 Passive Houses. It's been fun to be involved, and I just like seeing people, and so I guess that's my excuse for doing all this. Is I enjoy the conversations with the community and try to be a bit of a connector. So.
And when did you join 475, and why did you stop being a property developer?
Yeah, so in the summer of 2018, so the Passive House that we were working towards on building was just kind of in the design phase, and so I was like, okay, well, need to go do a couple renovations to pay the bills, and I just got impatient with the fact that I couldn't find Passive House clients to work for or high performance buildings to work on. And just being a contractor sometimes where you're not getting paid, and I learned afterwards that I didn't have a really good process of vetting clients, and when we had a lot of employees, we just had to in a sense find work to keep the employees busy, and so kind of about 2016, 2017, my dad and I realized, like, him and I would go to work and we'd be yelling at each other. It's like, Dad, like, we're best friends. Like, why are we doing this? Like, we should be going back to our, ethos of the company, and we need to make this transition. And so in that process of doing it, he decided to retire, and this opportunity with 475 came up when I was like, well, I could either build 3 or 4 passive houses per year, or I could be involved in a much broader group of people. And that's what 475 has allowed me to do, is connect to hundreds of projects per year. And some of them, again, are amazing. Like, we're not just talking about passive house projects, but we're talking about passive house plus living building challenge projects. We're talking about co-housing projects, and so where passive house is just a part of that holistic design that it should be. And I love the Accelerator's new website that shows passive house plus low embodied carbon materials plus electrification plus the renewable energies equals zero carbon. It's like, there's this beautiful equation and we all can just follow.
Yep.
And make it work.
Michael Ingui said something which has been ringing in my head, which is beyond passive house. And I've thought a lot about that I think, passive house is making that cabin be more than just shelter. And then it facilitates anything else that you want to add on to that to work towards, whether it's zero carbon or low toxicity materials. Anything else is awesome, but if you do that with that really good foundation of a well performing envelope, then everything else is possible. So I really like that concept. You spoke of that ability to have a broader impact, and I think that a lot of people want to have a bigger impact, and that's something that Daniel Kress has spoken about as well, as having a relatively limited influence as a builder, maybe slightly more as a designer, but as an educator, you have the chance to have a hand on so many more projects, and more importantly, so many more people that you can inspire and influence. And is that what sort of gets you up in the morning now, and what you get to do in your role, both at the 475 but also in your hobby as part of the Accelerator?
Yeah, no, it really is. And like the last 3 or 4 months, I've been working with Mark Wiley, who's part of the Passive House Accelerator construction tech team. And with Mark, him and I have been really trying to figure out like the narrative, the story of Passive House, because I know 6 months ago, I used to always talk about the 5 Passive House principles, and then kind of meeting Mike Ingwe, he's like, Shaun, we don't talk about the principles. We just talk about the benefits. And then I was like, oh, this is like Passive House Fight Club. We just don't talk about it. Okay. All right. Little nugget there. And so just trying to figure out the people that get Passive House, they're part of the groupie. But it's a question of like, when I first started to teach people or talk to people, I literally just opened up the fire hose and just sprayed them with the Kool-Aid, and hopefully they would get it. But some people, they don't get it. And so I was like, okay, I need to figure out how to just give them the teacup. And after the teacup, we give them the pitcher and then the fire hose. And so trying to not get so excited when someone says, oh, about Passive House. And I just start, blabbing my way. I try to like tease them a little bit about what I do know and figure out the angle, so that when I can leave them, that I've really like implanted that, Passive House, passion with them, because I get this. I want this for everybody. Everyone should be doing this, but my passion for it can be a bit overdoing. So I need to kind of try to figure out how do we those conversations, and this kind of takes me back to when I was a builder and renovator. I don't think I asked enough of those questions to people. I didn't listen enough to my clients. I just was like, hey, you can hire me. I'll be great. Let's go do this. And, went down, maybe not the greatest of path. We were involved in some awesome projects, and then some that, that we learned a lot from. And now it's just a question of, when people sit down and they talk about their projects, it's, okay, well, what do you want? What are your goals? And is that part of one of the benefits of Passive House? So then we can include that benefit. Oh, hey, you're looking for, good indoor air quality. Oh, well, we should talk about the Passive House, because if you, wrap it really nice, put in a really good fresh air, continuous, fresh air machine, you should be okay. We don't need to kind of use some of those big scientific words until they ask for it. And then you're like, okay, here you go. So
That's a really good point. Yeah, about meeting people where they're at. I mean, it's sort of a fine line between marketing, sales, communication, and then education, and not inundating people and overwhelming them with all the knowledge that you have, but rather listening and meeting them where they're at.
Yeah. Because most people, like I said, is, they want shelter. They want a house that, kind of matches the Joneses, where it has all the average things that we all expect. They don't know about Passive House. And so I'm really lucky in Vancouver and in BC with the BC Energy Step Code with policy, because now for people that don't like it, I'm like, well, guess what? It's coming. So talk to me when you're ready, because it's coming. And so that's going to help, because I can be maybe a little bit egotistical or be a bit demanding with it, because I know policy is coming. And so it's a question of, do I push it or do I pull, and how do I gauge, the particular client or subcontractor or builder or whoever's, in the marketplace. But it's exciting that, by 2032, everything's pretty much near Passive House in BC, and then probably within Canada too. So it's kind of like, I've got 11 years to hang out until we're there. And then, but I mean, it's exciting too, because like the low embodied carbon conversation, I mean, I've been kind of really into it for the last 3 years, but last year, kind of with COVID and with these online platforms, that language and that, that phrase has really caught on with people. And so, whatever it takes to get people to realize that we can build better shelters, and because we have the knowledge, we have the data and the science, and I love getting in conversations with people, because now when they want to talk opinions, I'm like, I appreciate your opinion, don't want to hear it. If you want to debate that data and science, happy to have that conversations, because I have a chance to learn from you. But if you're going to just tell me how you don't like Passive House, I don't want to hear it, because I know the benefits, and I know it is, people will benefit and enjoy that, that space. So moving forward is a little bit of like, how do we take the Icebox Challenge to, 2.0, where it's not just about melting ice and people can see the energy efficiency, because people and money are funny, they don't quite get it. Like, they want to save money, they want to have the money, but when you're saying, hey, here's something that can help out in your pocketbook, doesn't quite land. And so it's like, how do we create a Passive House experience where you could get into, say, like a tiny house and feel the benefits? And once, it's kind of funny, because when we, you come home late at night, you'd have these commercials, and they want to sell you stuff. And in those like 22 minutes, there's like 18 minutes where they're telling you the benefits about that item. And like the last 4 minutes, it's like the price. And so it's kind of like with a process, is like, how do we get somebody and talk to them about all the benefits and let them touch and feel and see it, and then the last part be like, by the way, it doesn't have to cost you anymore, or we can give you twice for the same price, and the payback is 6 months or whatever it is. But it's getting them to understand and touch and feel, and so they really get to experience this benefit, because most people, they just know the current house that leaks and has condensation and has to deal with not being at that lovely 21 degrees Celsius that we all enjoy. The homes fluctuate too much, or we have to use a whole bunch of non-renewable energy sources to get us to that comfy, warmy, or cool state, depending on where you are in the planet.
Yeah, which ends up being more expensive. I think you're right. It is we can a lot of us tend to be from an engineering kind of technical background. We can definitely learn a lot from marketing
experts in the marketing world on how to talk about Passive House in a way that's meaningful to people, and like you say, probably in a Fight Club sense without talking about Passive House. You mentioned Icebox Challenge. We should probably, for some people, most people will have heard of it and seen it, but how did you describe it? We're not talking about pouring buckets of ice cold water on people's heads.
Yeah, no. That was a great fact. In this particular case,
different craze.
Yeah,
how did you describe it?
We had two boxes, 8 feet by 8 feet by 8 feet. So you get that idea now. One is wrapped with all the benefits of high performance, and the other one is your typical code. And so over either a 2 to 4 week span, we had ice on the inside and just out in the elements. And of course,
so it's kind of inverted, right? You're sticking an ice cube inside a regular building, and then one that's well insulated, airtight.
Yeah,
and then you just watch
high performance
and
windows.
There's a little window in there, so you can see the ice cube.
Exactly, and see it melt. And then we had a temperature gauge on the inside, and on different venues, we even had scales, so we could see kind of like daily the difference between it all. And every location had its own story. I think of Vancouver when we started it. We had this hose because the local park didn't want us leaking water onto the sidewalk, and so the hose, would go over to the grass. And so of course, like the parks board, loved the fact that we were watering their grass, and I marked which pipe was to the code house and one to the passive house, so I could tell, just from the water flowing out, how it was performing.
I would imagine the code house did lots more watering over that period than the.
It absolutely did. In Seattle, when we took off the ice box, we took the kind of cap off, when the ice was melting, like the local Seattle police officers and their horses came by, and like the horse was like licking the ice. And and then but also too is the connections, or even another fun story too in New York. In New York, the Belgian consulate got involved in that particular event, and so they had one of their famous designers, kind of, I call, like, they pimped the passive houses. So that's how the new design of what happened in New York. And I mean, in New York, it was in Times Square. There was 250,000 people that walked past these things, and some of them, again, in the busy New York, just cruised on past. But I think we got to at least touch a few people and introduce Passive House to people in New York, and Philadelphia. It was in on the old Navy base. So every location has a crazy story, and hopefully, not hopefully, I know we left a mark with the communities, and hopefully we can do it again. I know we're kind of in process now of talking about it again, and I thought we were kind of like past it, like, oh, we need to do Icebox Challenge 2.0, and I think some communities still need that initial touch of just understanding the what it looks like to see the ice melting, and some other communities are looking for the comfort and being able to touch and feel things. So
absolutely, I think we need to rinse and repeat everywhere. I mean, there have been Icebox Challenges here in New Zealand. I know that's been successful in Australia, but I think we would be wise to think or realise that we were only scratched the surface there of some people seeing it, and some people need to see it multiple times to understand what's going on, and there'll still be lots of people who've never seen it. And similar, there'd be other ways as well of having a visual demonstration of those physical concepts that we can get out there. I know there are plans out there available, drawings, and people are willing to share. So if anyone is keen to do something like that and get the message out in a public space, then I'm sure that there'd be people willing to help out and tell you how it's done, so you don't have to reinvent another icebox. Just before we close off, you mentioned something right at the start when we were talking about prefabrication. You said that it wasn't sustainable; it was just efficient. Can you describe what the difference is between efficiency and sustainability?
Yeah. So, I mean, at the time, they said it was sustainable because the materials and the process, because, you're not wasting all that wood. And yeah, that's right. But at the time, some homes could be built to the R2000, which is kind of like, so if you think of like the Passive House story, it started in Canada, went to Germany, and then came back. Well, in that process, the modeling was still there. And so R2000s, like Passive House Lite, for example, didn't have really good HRVs, but that was a choice. And for me, it's like, well, we should be building R2000. We should be building to that standard. And then also the materials we're offering were not as sustainable as I would prefer. Again, we look at that low embodied carbon conversation. We weren't there. We were offering double pane windows, where in our climate, you really need a triple pane window. It's tough to get to these efficiencies. And so I knew there was more, and I knew that the company was definitely on the right path, but I wanted to be involved with something at the next level, and that be this benchmark, that we just didn't offer, here's base, here's middle, here's that. I wanted to get into the point where, kind of like, at 2032, where we're at building the Passive House levels, we're just there. We don't need to, work on it. And so I definitely developed that passion for sustainable prefab passive homes, but I also believe that they should be affordable. And so I do get into these conversations about affordability, about people's budgets. And to me, anybody, if it's their goal to have a passive house, they can get there. It's just moving line items in their budget.
Yeah. We could obviously talk quite a long time about a whole raft of things.
Yeah.
I encourage, if people are listening to this, they're probably already looped into the Passive House Accelerator community, but that's definitely a great place to see more of your work. You're prolific on YouTube and Instagram as well, so I encourage people to check out there. And I have to say, shout out to the rest of the team, 475. The videos, your educational videos, get seen around the world. Often we get asked about something people seen, and eventually we find out what they've been looking at is a 475 video. So awesome resources. To close off, I'd like to find out from you who's been one of your big influences, who's inspired you. Is there any one or a couple of people that have really motivated you to do what you do today?
Yeah. So each one of, if I go back, it's funny, I have these iconic mentors when it comes to my, passion for sustainable prefab passive homes. But in the passive house world, I've been really fortunate with Sandra Roller, who teaches the passive house course here in Canada. She's the one that taught me. And so her and Marcel with Econ Group, those two were the ones that really taught me the basics of how to teach passive house. And then from there, it's been nice to be able to kind of use their kind of skill to be able to connect with people. And so they're, really big powerhouses in Passive House Canada, and, really lucky to have met Sandra and Marcel. And so those are two of the key ones that I love to give praise to, because the Passive House community, definitely wouldn't be the way it is here in Vancouver without those two. They helped kickstart BCIT's education program, and definitely are part of the the education team within Passive House Canada. So we're lucky to have them, and I'm definitely lucky to have them in my life. So
awesome. As we are lucky to have you, Shaun, on the accelerator and amongst all the other things that you're involved in. So thank you for your time today, but also for your ongoing work and the great information you're putting out there. It's great to have people with your enthusiasm and experience out there. So thanks very much.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it, Matthew.
And
And that was Shaun St-Amour, who is a regular of the Passive House Accelerator in various contexts. Obviously, part of the host of the happy hour, but where else can people catch up with Shaun on a regular basis, Zach?
Yeah, every Tuesday or Wednesday your time on Construction Tech Tuesday. He's one of the co-hosts of that program, and you'll also see him on various monthly events that we produce, and he's all over the place with it on the accelerator.
Yes,
so he can't miss
I've in the last year, I've done my fair share of facilitating online calls, not usually with 120 people or more. I got to say, he does an amazing job of wrangling questions, because that's a pretty active chat forum sometimes in that, particularly in the happy hour, and to keep that going while somebody else is talking, and then say something that makes sense and guide questions. He does an extremely good job of that.
So what were some of your key takeaways from your conversation?
Well, kind of, as you said from the outset, I've been taken by the energy that Shaun has, and his personality, the trying things that are a little bit out there, like the Icebox Challenge. It's become quite well known within the Passive House community, but it's such a good example of kind of creative thinking and getting the message, or getting a concept of Passive House out to a wider audience, because it's easy for us to just get into this kind of talk about energy efficiency and airtightness and some of the science and the energy per square meter and air changes per hour, but just having something that is a kind of captures people's eye, and people start to question, well, what's going on here? And it's a little bit weird because the ice is on the inside, and that's not really, and it's wet. You don't really want that in a house, but it encourages people to ask questions about the building envelope and how two that look similar can actually perform quite differently.
It really does, and we should include in show notes a link to a video that we did of the Icebox Challenge in Seattle that features some interview with Shaun, a few years back. And then, and another thing I wanted to mention is that I actually didn't buy the ice boxes for $1. I was working for it, but I was working for NK Architects at the time, and Brandon Nicholson, the principal of NK Architects, did buy the ice boxes for $1. But the ice boxes went on this North American tour thanks to Shaun. He was flying out to New York, flying out to Pennsylvania, to DC to help make the Icebox Challenge happen in partnership with local partners. There's a photo of the Icebox the Icebox Challenge was placed in DC, just a few blocks away from the White House. This is during the time when we had the climate denier in chief living in the White House. That was powerful, and so that's all. That is just selfless. Focus on this goal of raising awareness about high performance building, raising awareness about the climate mitigation that Passive House can bring. It was quite something to behold, that whole Icebox Challenge tour.
Yeah. Another thing that I thought and think about I wasn't aware of his background as working in a building company and growing that company. And I've heard a few people talk about thinking about where they can have the most impact and enjoying building, making homes, and then growing a company that's seems like the dream, really. Growing up a business that you something that you enjoy doing, having a team of employees. But at some point, people kind of think, well, where can I have the most impact? And I've heard a number of people, and Daniel Kress comes to mind as well, thinking about his journey from going from builder to architect to then educator. And it's sort of like concentric rings of influence, and saying, as a builder, there's a limited number of houses you can provide each year. Maybe as a designer, you can have an input on many more, because you're not having to build every single one. But as an educator, you can be talking to a room full of 100 designers, and each of those can then potentially go and create great things. And I get the sense that that's part of what's been influential in Shaun's journey.
Yeah, definitely. Plus, that's connecting people as well. Like he's been building this network of practitioners in BC for many years and beyond. And then with the going virtual with the happy hour, that's become much broader geographically. But I think there's the same kind of impetus there, where by connecting people, having different practitioners tell their story to a whole bunch of other practitioners about, what went well, what lessons they learned from these different projects. It's a way to accelerate that learning, that the experience curves that we all need to go through to be able to deliver Passive House at or very close to cost parity with conventional construction, and get to that tipping point where Passive House becomes just the no-brainer for all sorts of different reasons, because it's a better product and it doesn't cost more. So there's that the social element, the networks element as well. I think that he's really helped to move forward,
which is truly global now. We talk about having getting get-togethers with their local community, which is really important as well, and we can do that more and more now. Get back into go and have a drink with people, and go and visit people in Passive House open homes, open days, which is happening. But having that global reach, there's so much we can learn from each other. There's so much in common around the world. Seattle's warming up, everywhere's warming up, so maybe the Northern Hemisphere can learn a few things from what we've discovered about keeping houses cool down in the Southern Hemisphere. And Shaun's definitely been a big part of that, encouraging people to share. The other place, we didn't really talk about this in the interview, but the other great thing that Shaun does share quite often are simple but very effective videos. And I've often pointed other people or use Shaun as an example of how powerful it can be to just play at your phone on a building site or on a project, or walking past something and just make a very quick video. I know we have a conversation at work sometimes. We get a little bit hung up on, it has to look professional and we have to put branding and on it. It's like, no, you don't. You pull your phone out, talk into the camera, and show people what's going on. And they're some of the most popular and most watched videos out there. And Shaun's really great at doing that.
Yeah, he is. Yeah, right. And just get it out there. Just get it out there. It doesn't need to be perfect. Yeah, absolutely.
Especially if there's a blower door happening in the background. That's always good fun.
Yeah, definitely.
Awesome. Anything else from you?
Well, I was happy to hear and surprised to hear. Actually, it's not entirely surprising, but it sounds like he was a pretty serious hockey player or athlete. Yeah. So that was cool to hear as well.
We could have lost him to the world of sports and fame.
Yeah, exactly.
Or he could have just got beaten up.
Yeah, he still has good teeth, so he's in good shape.
Awesome. All right, what do we got going on around the place in the coming up weeks?
At the Accelerator, we've got the construction tech will feature Connor Malloy of George Brown College, and he's going to be talking about the student wall assembly competition that was held just a couple of months ago by the BSN beer community. And he's going to be highlighting winning entries from that competition, which include Dylan Ingwe's contribution that followers of Construction Tech and Happy Hour will be excited to see. And he'll also be talking about that competition in general, the effort to train trades and designers in the technical technique and technology of delivering passive house buildings. So it should be really interesting. And then on Thursday your time, we'll have the Global Passive House Happy Hour, and that will feature James Ortega from FIAS, who will be presenting about the measured versus modeled performance, and he'll be focusing in particular on a recent multifamily project in the U.S. So that the whole benefit of Passive House in terms of delivering predictable results will be something that James will be diving into and talk about. So lots of other stuff going on. We'll share a link to other organizations' events and classes coming up in the show notes. So check those out for sure.
I want to do another shout out for all of the great retrofit content that's on the website at the moment, including the articles in the magazine. I'm just really interested in that area, but it's great to see some fantastic projects looking at turning existing buildings into passive houses. Big challenges and lots of great learning there, and there's some really great articles and pictures and videos, heaps and heaps of content, so check that all out on Passive House Accelerator.
Yeah, and a big shout out to Mary James for the editor of the magazine for making that happen. And I'm just so pleased that we get to work with Mary, and that the magazine is now part of Passive House Accelerator. She's bringing just some journalistic oomph to the accelerator that
she's awesome.
Is really pretty exciting.
Yeah. It's easy for us. We just sit in front of a microphone and talk, but she has to
Exactly.
do the hard stuff, which is write and make it coherent.
Yeah.
And she does a great job of it.
She does.
Awesome. Hey, well, thank you, Zach. I hope you stay cool this weekend. Sounds like it's going to be a bit of a shocker. Definitely getting smacked in the face a little bit by some of the reality of some interesting climate happenings there. So we will touch base and see how you've managed to pull through this time next week.
We'll be fine. We'll huddle in our basement. We'll be good. But yeah, thank you, Matthew, and great conversation with Shaun. Thanks for sharing that with everybody.
Cool. Thank you, everyone. We'll hear from you again. You'll hear from us again next week on the Passive House podcast.